There are many ways to spin up a local development server for WordPress, but most of them involve installing PHP and then MySQL and then some kind of web server like Apache or Nginx, and it can become quite tedious if you want to try your website with different versions of PHP or MySQL. In this video, I'd like to show you an alternative method, the one I always use for WordPress development, which doesn't involve installing PHP or MySQL or Nginx. You can actually spin up a dev server with Docker. The strategy is that you create two services, one for the database and one for the WordPress instance, which will connect to the database. Let me show you how to do that. First of all, make sure you have Docker and Docker Compose. You can do that by running Docker version and Docker Compose version. If you don't have Docker or Docker Compose, just install it from the official website. Now, the only thing we need is actually a docker compose.yaml file, which describes a network of containers. Again, in our case, we need just a database and a WordPress instance. Let's start with the database. I've already created this docker compose.yaml file. And to create a database, we need to describe services. And here's what our database will look like. We use the latest MySQL image. We bind port 3306. And this is quite important. We create a persistent volume and bind it to the folder var libmysql. It's necessary in order to make MySQL persistent. Otherwise, all the data will be lost after you shut down the database. And here we specify that we want this service to create a database called WordPress, and here we specify the password for this database. Alright, now that we have described the database, let's move on to the WordPress instance. We use the official WordPress image, we bind the port 80. Here we specify the name of the database, the password to the database. Again, this is quite important. The database host, make sure you have the same host as the name of this service. So these two values should match. And here we have our database user. It's root by default for MySQL. And here we just specify that our WordPress service depends on this database. And finally, don't forget to create a persistent volume to use it here. If you've done everything right, you should be able to start the containers by running docker compose up. And as you can see, these two services are running now. And if you go to localhost, you should see this beautiful website. You might need to fill out this initial installation form. I've already done that. As you can see, we've now set up a local WordPress dev server without installing PHP or MySQL or Nginx. I mean, it's now installed within the containers, but once you shut down the server, it's gone. You don't have it directly on your machine. Now, as you can see, I actually have some theme files in this project, but there's no new theme here on the website. That's because we didn't bind this project directory to any directory inside the WordPress container. To do that, I'm going to uncomment this section. What it does is it simply binds this project directory to the theme directory called MyNiceTheme. And now if you restart the containers, you'll notice that a new theme appears here. It's called MyNiceTheme. I can activate it, and as you can see, it's my custom theme. Of course, you can use the same workflow to develop plugins. Just bind the project directory to the plugins directory instead of the themes directory, and you should be good to go.